Hi, I'm Brianna.
And I'm Akira.
And you're watching
Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? Well, the projected numbers are in when it comes to Canelo Alvarez versus Liam Smith. And let's just say there's some good news and there's some bad news when it comes to these pay-per-view numbers. So the numbers have been projected to be anywhere from 250 to 300,000 pay-per-view buys. The good news is, at least good news for Golden Boy Promotions, is they can say that they generated twice the amount of pay-per-view buys that Golovkin versus Lemieux did. Because we know that when it came to Golovkin versus Lemieux, those pay-per-view numbers were anything from 97,000 to 150,000. That is the good news. The bad news when it comes to this numbers is Canelo Alvarez's last pay-per-view fight, he did 900,000 pay-per-views against Miguel Cotto. That is a substantial drop if you really look at the math, right? Now, some of you guys are going to say, well, of course the numbers were much better because Canelo was in the ring with a much bigger name opponent when it comes to Miguel Cotto. But that's the exact point, and that's what's wrong with this picture. The fact that the numbers dropped from 900,000 to 250,000 clearly suggests Canelo picked an opponent that nobody wanted to see him face. Nobody wanted to watch this fight. Nobody knew who Liam Smith was, and that's the reason why no one tuned in. You can't even really attribute these poor numbers to people saying that, you know, pay-per-view is dying and no one is paying for pay-per-view anymore, because I just told you guys, Canelo's last fight, he generated 900,000 pay-per-views. That wasn't 3 years ago. That was 2 fights ago. That was 2 fights ago. Okay, so, and you know what, and let me retract what I said. I told you guys that it was Canelo's last fight. I mean, his second to last fight, because his last pay-per-view fight was against Amir Khan. But I'm only talking about the Cotto numbers because those were the best numbers that Canelo had ever done, right? But with that being said, so the bad news once again when it comes to these numbers, I don't really know how Oscar De La Hoya is looking at the situation, because to me, these numbers, they don't surprise me. This is what I expected. I expected the numbers to be anywhere from 150 to 300,000 buys. So these numbers, they don't really surprise me at all. Now, some are speculating that Oscar De La Hoya, he's going to be upset about these numbers, but I really don't know. I mean, it seems to me that Oscar De La Hoya, even he should have known these numbers were not going to be good numbers, and they certainly weren't going to be Cotto type of numbers, right? You know, I truly believe that Canelo Alvarez, he puts Oscar De La Hoya in a bad situation. Because deep down, Oscar De La Hoya, as much experience as Oscar has in the ring, he was a gold medalist, he's won multiple titles, he was even pound for pound the best fighter in the world at one point. With that type of experience, Oscar De La Hoya, he knows Canelo Alvarez's limits. And I truly believe that Oscar De La Hoya, he doesn't believe that Canelo Alvarez can beat some of the best fighters at 154, because if Oscar did, it would have made far more sense financially to put Canelo Alvarez in the ring with one of the Charlo brothers. If you're going to place a fight in Texas, right? Canelo Alvarez, he draws a lot of fans in Texas. Guess what? The Charlo brothers are from Texas. Do you know how big that fight would have been? I mean, even Canelo Alvarez versus Demetrius Andrade, the best fighter at 154. Imagine Canelo Alvarez facing Demetrius Andrade in New York. Do you know how big that would have been? Canelo facing Demetrius Andrade at the Barclays Center or Madison Square Garden. That would have been a huge success. And it would have did better pay-per-view numbers, I guarantee you. Because a lot of fans are going to tune in and support Canelo Alvarez just because of the fact that they know deep down Canelo Alvarez is in the most dangerous fight of his career. So naturally, the Canelo Alvarez fans are going to come together even more to support and root for their fighter, Canelo Alvarez. So to me, there's no doubt about it. If Canelo would have took the chance or took the risk to face the best fighters at 154, the pay-per-view numbers would have been better. You know, Bob Arum said something a long time ago that made a lot of sense, and it was some straight truth when he was promoting Oscar De La Hoya. I remember when Oscar De La Hoya was still looked at as the golden boy, and he had all these girls that were flocking to him, treating him like he was a superstar, right? A lot of the guys used to hate on Oscar De La Hoya because the girls loved Oscar so much. But Bob Arum, he said, oh, I don't worry about that at all. Because soon as Oscar De La Hoya starts fighting white and black fighters, then all of those fans are going to come together and unite. That means all of the fans that were hating Oscar De La Hoya, they are all going to unite because now they feel they're in a situation where there's a bigger threat and they need to all come together. This is pretty much what Bob Arum said. The reason why I bring that up is, like I was just telling you guys a minute ago, this is the reason why if Canelo gets in the ring with the Jamal Charlo, Demetrius Andrade, Julian Williams, it doesn't matter how many fans Julian Williams or Andrade or the Charlo brothers have, because at the end of the day, more fans are going to flock and gravitate to Canelo Alvarez because they feel that Canelo needs them more than he has ever needed his fans to have his back. That's basically how it works. This is the reason why the majority of time when you have a fighter like Canelo Alvarez, a fighter like Oscar De La Hoya, when they fight against, especially an undefeated black American fighter, they usually do big numbers. Because once again, this is when all of the fans come out and support. Perfect example, Sugar Shane Mosley. As good as Shane Mosley is, he was never a big draw in the sport of boxing. I remember when Margarito was the best welterweight in the world, when he knocked out Miguel Cotto and it looked like he was indestructible, right? I remember watching him fight live at the StubHub, and it wasn't even a full house. He was fighting at the StubHub. All of a sudden, he fights against Shane Mosley, and this is a Shane Mosley who people thought at the time was a little bit past his prime. To their surprise, he still had a lot left in the tank. But anyway, when he fought against Shane Mosley, remember, a guy who usually doesn't sell tons of tickets on his own, when Margarito fought against Shane Mosley, they had to move that fight to the Staples Center. And that fight was a complete sellout when it comes to tickets. Now, don't get me wrong. Clearly, Shane Mosley, at the time, he had already been in the ring with much bigger fighters. He had been in the ring with a lot of big names, Oscar De La Hoya, Fernando Vargas. But the point that I'm making is, once again, Mosley was never a big draw like a Floyd Mayweather. But the fact that Antonio Margarito was going up against Mosley, and this was a comparison. You had this wrecking machine, Antonio Margarito, who was knocking out everyone. He's going up against a very tough, durable Shane Mosley that had never been knocked out before. So a lot of fans that were supporting and rooting for Antonio Margarito, they wanted to see Antonio Margarito make history, becoming the first man to knock out the very durable Sugar Shane Mosley. So with that being said, once again, I'll tell you guys all of this because there's no doubt about it. Canelo versus Andrade, the Charlo brothers, would have done much better pay-per-view numbers than this Liam Smith fight did. So, we'll see what Canelo Alvarez does next. They say no matter who he fights, it's going to be on pay-per-view, so that'll be really interesting to see who they dig up because they already said they don't want to fight Willie Monroe. We know he's not going to fight Golovkin in his very next fight. So let's see who he can fight to pretty much generate some good pay-per-view numbers, or at least better numbers than these ones right here. That's all I got, guys. I'm on to the next one.